I'm Jeremiah Johnson,
I'm Matt Powell.
I'm Ernesto Enciso.
and we're here with
Tony Miliaccio.
on May 7th, 2024 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for our oral history project.
So we start off by you giving us a brief interview of when and where you were born.
Yeah. I was born here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, December 17th, 1962. Grew up in the neighborhood, actually not far from your high school, off of 26th in Michigan. That's where it all started.
Yeah, and then how was that? Or how was the community within that neighborhood? Was it all like,
Yeah, it was pretty tight-knit. Home I grew up in was a family home that actually my grandfather owned. My dad and his brothers grew up there, and then we, as kids, moved there. So it was a decent middle-class neighborhood at the time. I went to St. Rose Grade School, which was in that area.
How did it feel like growing up in the 1960s, like that era? Like, explain like how that was, like to be in that part of that time period.
My memories of a kid growing up were, and you probably hear this from your parents, but it's like times were a little different. I think you were a little freer to go outside, do what you wanted. You could go out with your buddies and hang out in the neighborhood. Not that people don't now, but I think there just seems to be a little more caution right now than maybe our parents had that caution too, but we were too young to realize it, But it was a cool neighborhood, a lot of neat kids, a lot of good memories in from that time. Growing up in that era, I do remember a little bit. I was on the younger side, but like kind of the later '60s with some of the things that were going on in the city with equal rights and some marches. It does stand out that it was going on. Like I said, I was pretty young still to really understand it all.
And then with like growing up, like during that time in that neighborhood, like what was your fondest memory, like with your buddies or your siblings growing up, like having fun being kids? Like what was your fondest memory?
Yeah, I mean, we used to spend the summers, we would go over to like Merrill Park. We would go over to on 20, like where the Eagles Club is on 24th or 5th in Wisconsin. Now I think it is like a rehab center or something like that, But it was pretty open there. It was a park area actually. We used to go play there. We'd go to the Eagles Club, and I think for like the $2 you could go swimming. They had a huge pool and a weight room and a workout room. But it was a lot of good memories, just kind of kids in the neighborhood hanging out, guys that we went to grade school with. I had cousins that lived, it was a duplex, so we lived on the second floor and my cousins lived downstairs. So my uncle had 5 boys, so we were always together hanging out, doing different things.
Yeah. So like you said you lived in a duplex?
Yeah.
With your cousins and your family. So I was just wondering, how was your relationship with your siblings? I guess who are your parents and what they do for work?
Yeah. So my dad, and we had a family business growing up. It was an Italian restaurant called Como's. It was actually just a couple blocks from where we lived. And it was my dad and his 2 brothers and his 2 sisters. So it was my grandfather started it, and then his kids took it over. And then as kids, we all kind of worked there as well, helping out in the business. So kind of growing up in that family business, you were always together. I had 2 sisters that were older than me, and my mom worked at, it was called Family Hospital. It's gone now. It was on like 28th and Wells, I think, or 26th and Wells, and she worked in the cafeteria as a supervisor and kind of the meal planning type of things. And then my dad worked in the restaurant, so when we were really young. And then he left the restaurant business. They sold it at one point, and he went into the car business, like selling cars. Started kind of getting into that business.
And you said you went to St. Rose?
Yeah.
How was your experience at St. Rose as a student?
It was good. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like I said, going to that school, all the kids kind of in this school we all lived in that same neighborhood. A couple of my cousins that I mentioned lived in the same house, or like different, parts of the house. I guess they're duplex. Also went there, so we were always kind of hanging out. I can remember just like we had a wrestling team, when you're in 4th and 5th grade on the wrestling team, and we probably weren't any good, but we thought we were, There were summer sports like playing baseball. I don't think we did much with football, but it was kind of a cool experience. Catholic church that we all kind of attended, and some of us like altar boys. Some of my cousins where I was as well for a while.
So like, what was it like growing up in like an atmosphere where everyone felt like a community and a family type? Obviously, you lived with like your family as your cousins, all that.
Yeah.
You grew up with them, but how did it feel like to be a part of a family community with everyone being part of the same area, but also going to the same school as well?
Yeah. I think it was, you don't think of it at the time, I guess, but, you look back now, as I'm an old man, and I guess, I think there was comfort to it, that you were, around people that you knew and trusted. There was stability in your life because you kind of had you know what you were doing and where you were going. So I think that was really important, and being in a family with parents that were, they were firm but not like super strict, but we had to follow the rules, and if not, there were consequences.
So you talked about like that family business that your dad and his brothers like ran. What was like? Can you like explain like more of like the type of food or like things they did there?
Sure. It was in an Italian restaurant, and it also had like a carry-out. At one time, a carry-out business. We get like pizzas, kind of like now it's a Domino's or whatever you want to call it. But like we were kind of before their time, I guess. There was a lot of places like that, but there weren't the chain places back then. So they had pizza, like a carry-out little business, and then they also had a restaurant that you kind of sit down, a nicer venue, and then they also had a bar that was attached to it, and that piano bar, which was probably something at the times, was like people would go hang out, and there was like music in there, and so I can remember that as a kid going there, more helping out, like whether it was in the mornings in the summer or on the weekends during school, washing dishes, cleaning up, helping out whatever way we can, filling up the bar with ice, those are the type of things. But our parents kind of drew us into it to help them out, and it was a good learning experience. I guess you kind of start to learn the foundation of values and hard work and what it takes to kind of make things run in a business.
How old were you when you started working there?
We were, I was probably like 12. And then that was in this coming over to help out and do things, It wasn't anything like, slave labor, but it was your parents going, hey, you go over and give your uncle a hand or your dad a hand today. But I think, different times you could, everybody pitched in. So I did that. Yeah, we were probably like 12, 13, 14, maybe in that era. Yeah.
So obviously you talk about your grandpa and like that family legacy that you
Yeah.
guys have that's really strong. But I know like he immigrated in the early 90s. Do you like remember any stories he would tell you about like life in Italy and
Yeah.
life moving here?
Unfortunately, like being the younger of a lot of the kids, my grandfather like passed about when I was born, like in that I was just a baby, so I didn't get to really know him. But I've heard a lot of the stories through my dad, my grandmother, who was with us a long time after. But yeah, I mean, he immigrated here in the, I want to say, early 1900s. And he had a brother that came later. But in that period of time, I think a lot of people would leave Europe or whatever those countries to come here for a better life and leave family behind, but then try to bring them over later. But he did start here, and what I was told was he was kind of worked in the Third Ward area. Actually started, I want to say, he was a blacksmith in Italy, so that kind of trade came over here to help with horses and things like that. And then it kind of escalated or graduated to a business partner, and they started a produce business later on in the Third Ward. And then it went into the kind of the restaurant. So I just think, you look back at your history, family history, and sometimes you don't realize what, the generations before you did, or to get where you are, why you're here, which is really unique. And I think it's really important to kind of remember your roots and try to, keep track of your roots if you can, to pass that on to your next generation of kids and their kids.
So, before you mentioned you played a little baseball with the kids around the block.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if, how you got into baseball. Was it like a random interest?
couple of friends I had that lived in that area were a little bit more, at that age, were a little bit more into the baseball than I was. But we used to go to games at County Stadium, which before this was here, American Family Field or Miller Park before that. But we would actually, in the summer, we would walk, from where we lived off 26th Street, and we could walk through the valley here and kind of go over the railroad tracks and just come in the back gate by the bleachers and buy a $1 ticket or $2 ticket at the time. And it was more of an activity at the time to come to the game and hang out and see what was going on. And so kind of from my friends having that interest, I kind of got into it a little bit and had more understanding of baseball. Like I said, we were probably 13, 14 years old. We'd come over and our parents would just say, hey, if you go to the game, you've got to be home by 10. So the game would start at, I think back then they were started at 7 or 7:30, and you watch. You hope you could see the whole game, but at 9:30 you had the book, get home. Yeah.
So you talk about like coming with your friends and stuff like that to the Brewer games. What was like your fondest memory? Like, what can you remember of like coming and watching like the Brewers like that made you?
We used to try to come early, watch batting practice, and we'd be in the bleachers and try to get foul balls or home run balls from batting practice. I remember coming to the All-Star game in Milwaukee, which was in 1975, with my uncle. He had a couple tickets and said, "Hey, I'll take you to the game." I was pretty close to my uncle, my dad's oldest brother, Louis, and so that was kind of really a neat experience to go to an All-Star game and and see stars of all of that era. I think Hank Aaron played in that game, so it was kind of a neat experience.
So I guess around this time, you maybe 13, maybe 14 years old?
Yeah.
So did you always stay at, by, in the house by our school, or did you?
Yeah, we lived in that home till like on 26th Street until I was like, I want to say maybe 14 or so, and then my parents had bought a home off of like 41st and Forest Home, kind of where Jackson Park, that area, that neighborhood, southwest a little bit. So it was kind of like, was in later grade school, and then I was going to go to getting close to high school, and I ended up going to Pius from there. But so we lived on 26th Street and then pretty much on 41st and Forest Home.
How was like that move? Like, explain, like, it was probably like your first time not living with like your family as you're the youngest, so all your siblings probably moved out, but also not living with your uncle or cousin. Like, how did that like feel?
I think at the time, we were all pretty close. So, growing up in an Italian family, it's like every Sunday is kind of like a family day anyway. So it's like there was always family get-togethers, whether it was at an uncle's house or an aunt's house or my grandmother's house. So even though we kind of moved, and my cousins, I didn't see them, the ones that were living in the same duplex or house that we were. We always saw them on the weekends. We always saw them somewhere. So I don't think it didn't really affect me that much. I think they were always still a big part of our life.
Yeah. And, did you always work at Cummers, or how long did you work at Cummers?
I was till they had probably like, until I was about 14. I think that's about when they sold the business, and then I was kind of ended up starting here with the Brewers at right around that same time when I turned 15. So it was kind of married together a little bit in there.
You said you attended Pius High School?
Yes.
So I guess any clubs or extracurricular activities, or I guess sports in general?
Yeah, I played baseball for like the 4 years there, pretty much. Never played football. Other clubs we did. We had a speech club. We had was involved in like, talking about time-wise, like we had mock elections and things like that. I remember it was, I want to say it had to be 81 when it was Reagan got elected as president. So I remember a lot of us kids involved in a political science class or whatever it was. And then, some were supporting one candidate, the others, and then we did a mock election in the school. But pretty much the only sport was baseball, I guess. Yeah.
So like with that being like the only sport, pretty much, how would you just like describe like the team atmosphere or like the team spirit like towards like the baseball kids, and like did baseball kids get like special treatment from teachers or stuff like that?
Oh, while in school? I never really felt that. I think, all the athletes, student athletes, I felt were treated pretty much equally. I mean, some sports were definitely followed more than others. I think the football teams always seem to have a lot more school spirit just because the kids follow it more. It's more of a weekend thing throughout the school year. Baseball at that time, I know it's changed a lot. The seasons have went from spring to summer, and I think they're back to spring. So it was always kind of the end of the school year, April and May. The weather was like it is today, kind of rainy, so you never knew when you could play games. So it was harder to maybe get the support. But I always felt that I think the school and the kids treated all the sports fair, and the school did.
Do you have any personal highlights that you can remember playing on the team back then, or anything that just sparked your memory?
Yeah, I mean we my senior year the team wasn't real good, but we had some good players and we had some fun. But I can remember one game I was a catcher, and we were kind of rolling along a game, and there was actually some scouts at the game watching some of the kids. I remember with the team we were playing, but I remember I was catching, and there was a play that could pop up behind first base, and I was kind of running it down, and it was actually kind of going to be along the fence, so I kind of jumped up and caught this ball, and it was just kind of a unique thing, and I, some of the guys holy cow, you caught that, and at the time you do it, you don't think it's a big deal, and not that it was, but they made it like a big thing. So, but I remember even one of the guys that was a scout came over and said, "Hey, it was a pretty nice catch. What's your name, son?" And wanted to write down your name and your information, and didn't really pan out because I'm here not on the player's side, I'm one of these guys, but but it was unique. That stands out. Yeah.
So not to go off topic with high school life and life back then, but
yeah.
I know you talked about Reagan and how that experience in
Mm-hmm.
your high school, but also you were mid-teens, early teens, pre-teen age when the civil rights you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
What do you remember, how did that affect this late 60s, that era with Father Grappy and all of that?
Yeah, I mean I think it was it was definitely difficult times going on in the city. Like I said, being younger, maybe you didn't fully understand it all, but it did, like I said, stand out that there was a movement going on and people were looking for equal rights. And Father Grappy, I think we talked in a little bit earlier too about just his passion to help people and foresee that people had been treated fairly and there were equal rights for different things. So it did make an impression. Like I said, I was really young. Probably if I was a little older, maybe I would have been, maybe more understanding of it at the time. But it is a part of Milwaukee's history and important part.
Do you ever, if you can, do you remember participating in maybe a march or two? Or?
No, like I said, in that era I was pretty young. I mean, I was maybe 9 or 10, 12, whatever. So you're pretty young at that time. But I can remember it going on. I said we lived off 26th Street. And I remember there was, a march that went up 27th Street, I think across the viaduct, kind of where the domes are through that area. And can remember maybe it was with my mom or what, it was, some of our family, but kind of walking up to that street just to see what was going on and watch what people were doing and check it out. Yeah.
So to leave the 60s, can you explain life in Milwaukee as a teenager in the 70s, 80s, while growing up, going to Pius,
Sure.
I'm sure that was exciting.
Yeah, it was. The funny thing is, Marquette was our big rival, so here I ended up, my son attending the school you guys are at, and but it was good. It was fun. I mean, a lot of my friends all played either football or baseball. We were involved in a lot of the sports school activities. I just think it seemed like simpler times then. I'm sure you might have heard that, or your parents might say that as well. But it just seemed like you didn't have as many things weren't so decisive like right now in kind of the political world. Maybe you weren't aware of so much of the things going on in the city, if there was crime or bad things happening. But for me, my memories are a good memories, and I thought it was a lot of fun with the people I was with. Enjoyed the school spirit. So I have a good memories of growing up, I guess, is in that area.
May I ask, why Pius over, like, for example, like Marquette, like other schools, like, why, like,
Yeah.
like, what made you pick Pius?
At the time, a couple of kids that I was going to school with were going to attend Pius. Some were going to Mesmer, Dominican. A lot of us going to Catholic grade schools. We're going to continue through that system of a Catholic school, and I think mainly because I had a few friends that were going there, and we wanted to kind of be closer to some of the friends you had in that group.
Like, what was your favorite, like, classes, like, or, like, favorite class and, like, favorite teacher, if you can remember?
That's interesting. We had I had a math teacher. It was Mr. Slack. He was our algebra teacher, and I was not a great math student, believe me, but he made the class interesting. He was really made you think about a lot of things, so that he stood out. We had a history teacher. It was named Mr. Monty. Another teacher that kind of, made things interesting as learning, whereas you're just constantly reading a textbook and trying to understand it. They kind of helped you grasp it better,
all right. So I guess going out of high school.
Yeah.
Starting college. I guess how was that experience like? As a senior, going to college.
Yeah, I ended up playing baseball in high school, and then obviously working with the team. Kind of had the passion for baseball, and thought I was the okay player, but so I tried to extend that, and I had an opportunity to go to a smaller school called Central Arizona College. It's in Coolidge, Arizona. It's kind of halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, and it was a junior college. So at the time, I don't know if the rules have changed, but you could play for 2 years. You get your associate's degree and then move on to a 4-year school, or you could get drafted out of those schools. If you get drafted, you can actually sign with a team. Almost after the draft, you wouldn't have to wait till your junior or senior year. So I went there, and it was a great experience. It was a good school. It was smaller scale, but I enjoyed the time with the people I met, and you make lifelong friends. I think in college, after high school, you keep those friends, but I think the college friends you kind of spend a little more time with.
Can you explain the switch from Milwaukee to Arizona? Because those are completely different coasts.
Yeah. It was interesting because where I went to school, was not even really. It was a smaller town, even where the school was located. So let alone leaving Milwaukee and going to Arizona, the different climate, different everything. But then even a smaller city, temperatures going out there in August when you're, school starts. It's 105 degrees. You're like, holy smokes! But you get used to it. But I had the passion to play, and I had an opportunity there, and had a chance to kind of start my undergrad education there as well. But the differences were obviously being away from home, long way from home. I went there not knowing anybody, so I took the chance and spent the 2 years there playing, and then transferred after that. But it was a good experience. I mean, I still spend a lot of time in Arizona now, this day. Obviously with the job I have, because of spring training, you go down there. But I've always loved it, and we'll probably, someday retire when they kick me out of here, down there.
And where did you transfer to?
So I went to I had a unique kind of educational route, but I ended up going to ASU, but just for school. I didn't go to play baseball. I just did the 2 years, and after that it was just time. You kind of know, hey, all right, it was great, but it's time to focus on your education. So I went to ASU, and then I transferred back to UW-Milwaukee here, and I was working with the team and going back and forth, work spring training for a semester for the spring, and then I would go to school in fall, and I was kind of slowly getting my education done, but I kept my relationship here with the team and worked through high school and college doing it that way.
So you talked about it was time. How did that feel? Baseball, obviously playing days were over. You
Yeah.
kind of sense of grow up, mature. How did that
Yeah.
feel? The process to change your mindset. I'm not a student athlete anymore. I'm just a student.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think everybody in life goes through those, tough decisions where you have a passion for something, whether it's, whether it was me in baseball or somebody playing soccer or football or basketball, we all want to, hey, everybody wants to go to the farthest way they can go. And sometimes it's just, you have to realize maybe it just is the time, maybe do you keep chasing the dream or do you focus on your education? And I think I just felt at the time that, I knew what my abilities were and I wanted to keep going, but I just felt it was time to go and work on the education first. It's hard, but, you see pro players have to go through that as well. They've played their whole life, probably been the best wherever they've played, and they get to this level up here, but at some point that comes where they have to decide, or some of the decisions made for you, but that you have to move on with your life too.
Yeah, and you said you went back to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I guess what made you come back to study at UWI?
At the time, I guess I wanted to continue my education and get a degree, and I was working with the team, and I was trying to marry the two together. I wanted to still finish my schooling and come back here to work. And so that's how I kind of played out, I guess, for me, is, going to school in the fall at UWM, and for a couple of years I did that where I took the spring off. I would go with the team to Arizona for spring training, come back, maybe take a summer class, go back in fall. So it was a unique way to do it, but it was able to keep my relationship with the team and keep working here.
So you talked about it was not weird, but strange educational route to get to where you are right now. What did you study? Where you talk about your master's and degrees?
Yeah. Well, I was in communication, and I ended up kind of focusing on interpersonal communication and Japanese culture. And I don't know, I just found an interest in that. I think it was unique. I think it was some of the professors we had at UWM that kind of going through a few of the classes we had kind of really sparked the interest in that. And then later down the road, I actually was able to, with baseball, in 96, I think it was, yeah. Every year, couple of years, they'd take an all-star team to Japan to play. And I got picked to go as the equipment clubhouse manager. So I was able to kind of go to Japan with a group of guys, and we spent 2 weeks there. So I was actually kind of got to see some of the things that you read about or hear about, so it was pretty cool. I was fortunate that it happened that way.
Can you explain how did that feel? You're going over in Japan, just being clubhouse manager.
Yeah.
That experience interacting with those high level guys.
Yeah.
High level character men and athletes.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
It was really. It was exciting, fascinating. I think. I felt kind of I felt honored that they asked me to go. Usually they'll pick different people to do it, different teams, and I got asked that year. It was interesting to see because at the time the Dodgers had Mike Piazza and Hideo Nomo, and Nomo was from Japan, so he was a pretty big name, pretty big star. So he went over there on this group, and just to see the reaction of people there, the Japanese people, how excited they were for him, and it was really unique experience, I guess.
And going back to coming back to Milwaukee, you left for 4 years and you came back. Was the city different, or did you find any levels of change from the 4 years since you left and returned?
Yeah, I think in between there, I think earlier years, you kind of saw the city where it enough is the proper way, less populated, not as exciting. And I think, you've seen the resurgence maybe in that period of things starting to come back. And, one time there was the Grand Avenue Mall, and then that kind of dwindled, and then it was renovated, and, now it's back to, I think it's I can't think of the name of it now, but it's brought people back downtown. So I think in that period, yeah, you did see things kind of start to slowly rebuild, and the Third Ward started to kind of redevelop that area.
As you talk about rebuilding, what was the sports life, that environment of having the Brewers and the Milwaukee Bucks? How did that help revive the city?
Yeah, I think in those early eras of the 2000s, the Brewers were struggling a little bit, but getting better. And I think the same thing with the Bucks. And I think as your sports teams kind of evolve into better teams and more excitement. You know, I mean, you can see what happened with the Bucks when they made the playoffs and won it that year. You know, it's just like, I think people get behind it. They get a lot more passion for their city, a lot more pride. So I think sports has a really unique fixture in your, you know, I guess you'd say your atmosphere of your city. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess speaking of the Brewers, I guess it's kind of the reason why we're here, but I was just wondering how you got, or how you started getting a job with the Brewers.
Yeah. So I worked with, my dad worked with selling cars. I mentioned earlier he went into the car business like in the late 60s, and he was just a salesman with the cars with Ford Company here. And actually at the time he was with a company called Selig Ford, and Bud Selig, who a lot of people know became commissioner and was part owner of the Brewers and all that. His father had a dealership in town, and my dad went and started working for him, selling cars, learned the business, went through the trade of, you know, understanding the model of the cars. And at one time he had asked Selig, who was still had just received, the Brewers came in 70, this was like 77 maybe, so it was still fresh in the organizational history here. But he had asked Bud if I could get a summer job, just doing something at the ballpark, whether it was selling peanuts or sweeping up, whatever, just a summer job, you know. So he had asked me, my dad had asked him, and he said, hey, go down and talk to this gentleman, his name's Tom Ferguson, he'll kind of take care of you. So I came down after school one day, met this Tom Ferguson. He was like our vice president of team travel, and he said, yeah, when we come back from Arizona, I'll give you a call. We'll find you a job in the clubhouse doing something. I was like, okay. And I still didn't know what it entailed. So they called, I came down, and I started as a clubhouse attendant or a Batboy in the clubhouse. My first year was in '78 season. Yeah.
And I guess if you can remember, I guess, how the public felt, or like how the public felt about the city getting into a professional sports team, you know, being from the Brewers, coming from Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think people were elated, you know. I mean, the Braves had played, Milwaukee Braves, who left, I think, in 65 or 6, maybe it was after 66, for Atlanta, so there was no baseball in Milwaukee. And I think Bud Selig worked hard to kind of try to keep baseball here. They even had the White Sox play some games here from like 66 to 70 in that interim period. So they had worked with the Sox to come up and play a couple games during the season. And I guess they drew pretty well, and to show that there was still interest in Milwaukee. So in 1970, when the Pilots they played in 69 and then went to spring training in 70 and went through a bankruptcy, and Selig was able to coordinate the funding to buy the team and brought it to Milwaukee. So I think people were excited to have baseball back. It's always been a great baseball city here. And, you know, the early years were lean, you know, tough getting going, and obviously, but they got better. And I even, like, my first year by 78, it was really when they kind of took off and started to have some really successful seasons.
So, like, during, like, the 70s, I know on the basketball side, Milwaukee saw a lot of, like, buzz with big-name athletes like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robinson, and they won the World Championship in 1971. Like, what do you remember, like, growing up, like, that environment of, like, atmosphere in the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, I remember going to Bucks games as a kid in that era. You know, they had, I think, Lucius Allen, John McLaughlin, I want to say Bob Dandridge. So they had a really good team. I mean, now you guys would rattle off Giannis and, you know, those guys, but it was cool because it was I think, like, you know, when teams are successful and they go for those championships and playoffs, you know, it brings people together. And so my memories of that time were fond. You know, that it was a pretty cool time, and people supported the Bucks. You know, it's a different era because there weren't, you know, TV wasn't really. The games weren't televised as often, you know, so you couldn't get them like every game now you can get on TV. Well, back then maybe you only could televise 10 games or 12 games or whatever it was for basketball. So going to the games was a bigger deal to support them, you know.
Just a quick thing. You said that the White Sox played here?
Yeah. They would play like part of their schedule. So if they were supposed to be in Chicago playing the Angels, you know, they would come up and maybe play a weekend series here. you know.
Where did they play?
Yeah. And they played at County Stadium.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it was here before the Brewers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was in between the Braves leaving and then the Brewers kind of coming. So in that 5-year window, they had actually coordinated to have some games played here, and the White Sox came up and played. Yeah.
What do you like remember like that experience of like, not like I don't know if it was like more fan, but like more like local community like coming and watching, like how was that interaction with like supporting the Chicago team instead of like the Milwaukee team? If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think, from my memory and what hearing the stories after a lot of it too, are, people I think were just that really wanted to support baseball and see baseball, Major League Baseball. And so, I mean, people came out, and they drew really well. I don't know the exact numbers, but we could probably look it up. But I think people really wanted baseball here, and that was a good indicator once the Braves left that team could support, the city could support a team.
And I guess going back to the job, did you get a call back from, was it Bud Selig or his assistant? I guess, yeah, did you get a call back? And if so,
Yeah.
you did. I guess, what was like the first day like?
I remember I met the gentleman, Tom Ferguson, who was kind of the coordinator of all this in the wintertime, in January maybe, and he said, hey, we're going to be going to spring training, but we'll call you after we get back, so that's about the first part of April. So he called, said, come and meet me, and I met Bob Sullivan, who was the kind of home clubhouse manager, and Jim Kaczynski was the visiting clubhouse manager. And he said, hey, we're going to start you on the visiting side. You can help out over there. And, you kind of had to work your way over to the home side, put a couple seasons in or whatever. And, but I remember, my first games were like playing, the Brewers played the Baltimore Orioles, like opening day in 1978. I was down the right field line as a ball boy. So I remember walking in the clubhouse, and it was just kind of, I think you go to a game and you don't think or realize what's behind the scenes. Like you look around this room and, a lot of people think, they just have a place they get dressed, right? Well, this is where they get dressed, and this is where they eat their meals. This is where they work out. So it's more than just some room where the guys kind of hang out. But at the time, it was kind of really wide-eyed, and Oriole players started coming in, and I was a baseball fan a little bit, so I kind of knew who some of those guys were. But there was a guy with the Orioles, Mark Belanger was an infielder. Mike Flanagan, Jim Palmer, who ended up being a Hall of Fame pitcher, guys like that. And you're kind of first seeing them, and they're bigger than life to you. So it was a great experience,
Yeah, I guess anything that sticks out to you, being, I guess, a ball boy and interacting with players, team players.
Yeah, I think it was just, it's, you're a young kid. You're, it's opening day. You're like, hey, go down the line and play catch with an outfielder. So you're like, it's somebody growing up playing baseball, and you're warming up maybe, Paul Blair, who was an outfielder for the Orioles. He's playing left field, and you're playing catch with this guy, and you're like, wow, you can't believe it, right? And then, you're sitting there on the sidelines. If a ball comes, you pick it up, right? It's simple enough. But, there's fans sitting there, and they're kind of talking to you or trying to heckle you, or hey, give me a baseball. Well, can't do that sometimes. You got rules we have to follow. But it was good. It was a great experience. I like I can remember some of that stuff like yesterday.
Can you talk more about the 1982 World Series?
Yeah.
That series and how important you feel it was to the city for the Brewers to get back to
Sure.
that point.
Yeah. No, I think that you might have heard the stories, but the 81-82 team in there, was a really talented team. It was, I think, it had a really unique bond, and the guys, and I'm talking the players and the chemistry on the team, I think the guys got along well. They hung out together. They played together. And, you had guys like, Robin Yount, was an MVP that year. You had Raleigh Fingers, you had Pete Vukovich, who's, a Cy Young Award winner. So you had some players that were really at the top of their game that kind of came together and it gelled to have this great chemistry. And, you don't kind of see that all the time. We've had great teams here afterwards. And it's a different structure how the playoffs work and everything now. But back then, a team could win 100 games and never make the playoffs. But I think that was a really unique group. People, I think, could relate to them. Some of the guys were like Gorman Thomas and Pete Vukovich were kind of like Milwaukee type people. They were just working men. They were hardworking. They were a little bit rough and gruff, but people loved them. And so I think people just really connected with that. And when the team won the American League pennant, I mean, the city went crazy. They were partying down Wisconsin Avenue. The Marquette U students were pulling furniture out and they were laying them up on the streets and climbing on the trees. So it was a great experience. It was civilly done, but it was a lot of fun, a lot of good memories. And I just think that that group of players really connected with the people that lived here in the city.
What do you think is important for you talk about that group or that brand of that team that year that made the connection to make the city
yeah.
What do you think was their most their it factor that grabbed this city so much to have them go out and celebrate like that?
Yeah, I just think I think the guys were relatable. I think the guys were they didn't seem like they were at a different level than the people that were their fans. They seemed like they were that part of that group as well. I just think that was the chemistry that they had kind of transpired into the city, and people kind of jumped on board and really loved it and loved the people that were playing.
So you said earlier that you kind of had to work your way over to the home dugout. And were you there? Did you make your way to the home dugout for the World Series? Or?
My first year was '78, and I was on the visiting clubhouse the whole season. And then the next year, '79, I was on the home side and was there ever since. So yeah, eventually worked my way over there. I guess I proved I could do it, or did a good job. But it was neat. Coming on the home side, I can remember my first year, coming over here and then having to go out and be a Batboy and didn't have spikes, and at that time we wore blue shoes with the kind of the yellow striping on them. And, asking one of the players, Sal Bando was a player with the Brewers, and he gave me a pair of shoes, and it was my first pair of spikes I had really. I mean, I had some that I played with as a high school kid, but they weren't the right color, but those things stand out that, he was so gracious to say, hey, I'll give you these, take care of those,
I guess, how was your relationship with the players?
I think it was, it was good. In this clubhouse kind of environment, you're there to help people and provide assistance. Whether it's as a bat boy, let's say at that level, you're setting up the dugout, you're putting out the equipment, you're shagging baseballs, you're going out on the field. Maybe if you're the ball boy behind the plate, you're providing the umpire with balls. But I think as you're together more, like anything, you get to know people, you get comfortable, and they know what you can do. They can rely on you for things you want.
And then I guess for the World Series, I guess those 7 games.
Yeah.
How was the city
Oh, it was insane. It was a lot of fun. I mean, unfortunately lost in the 7th game, but it was cool to see the support people had for the team. Even coming back from St. Louis when we lost, they had a rally here at the ballpark. There was a parade for the guys through the city. I mean, so even though they didn't win, people treated them like winners. And I think they really valued the commitment and how far they went. Like I said, kind of back in the 80s, you had 4 divisions, and the top division winner would play off on the American League, and they would go to the World Series. So there's only 4 teams, and so you could come in second and win 100 games. So now with the wild card and extended playoffs, other teams are getting more chances. But it was really tough to get to that level. Really tough.
So moving on to the growth of the city to now put more money into the Brewers and investing more. What was the move from County Stadium to Miller Park or AmFam Field? How did that affect the city environment? Were people excited was the team excited like to have all
Yeah.
new facilities?
Yeah, I think people were excited. I mean, it was tough for the organization at the time to kind of get the funding and everything to fall into place. But once it did, I think people were excited. It was just a whole new adventure, really. I mean, people would come out when the first year we had this place, and they would come out just to watch the roof open and close because it was so phenomenal. You know what I mean? Like, it was a huge structure that, it was one of a kind. And so, I mean, they used to, at the end of every game, that first year for sure, I don't know if they did it in the second year, but, they would kind of make an announcement that, stick around to watch, I don't say they called it the roof show, but but they would actually, if the roof was closed, they would open it or vice versa, so people could kind of see it. It was kind of a unique thing. But I think over time, and now here 20-some years later, I think people really realize the value of that and the vision that maybe Selig had, that like how important it was to, if you're planning events, you want to come to a game, you want to be able to be comfortable, and you want to be able to not have to people coming from, let's say, up north, planning a trip, a bus trip down here, and the game gets rained out, or you have to sit in the rain. You can make plans. You're going to be able to have a game play every night at 7:05 or whatever it is.
As you talk about like the differences of like county and
Mm-hmm.
like the experience of like he wanted it to feel people feel safe and like come here and feel
Yeah.
like just like to be able to relax. Like, do you think that was like the major like overall difference of like county and Miller Park, or like what would you say was like the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like living in simple terms, living in a home. You grow up in a home that's small with a bunch of family members, and all of a sudden you outgrow it, right? There's not enough room. All of a sudden this doesn't work, that doesn't work. It was time for a new house. So the Brewers needed a new home, and they needed a better venue for their fans. Big part is, generating revenue, having skyboxes and suites and different other events that they can raise money to help pay salaries and pay the employees and all that. So it was time, and I think a lot of fond memories at County Stadium. It was a great place, but you move into this, and you had a bigger clubhouse, you had better weight rooms, you had better facilities for not just the players, but for the fans and for the employees that work here, the people in event services, and it was just time for the team to kind of make that move.
As we talk about like the move and like finding a new home,
Yeah.
like a lot of people might not know, but like the crane incident that happened, like
Yeah.
building Miller Park, like
Yeah.
how do you think that like impacted or like affected like everyone in the city?
Yeah. Oh, it was awful. It was sad. They were building this ballpark, and the roof structure that they were doing. You might have even looked it up and seen the video. It's online with this crane they built, this huge crane they called Big Blue, and it would make these roof lifts, these huge sections, and put it into place. And they built this right next door to County Stadium was right here. So we were, you could kind of really literally see the development every day of things changing and growing. And it was over like our All-Star break, and they were making a roof lift and putting a piece in place. And I guess the winds were a little bit higher than they expected. And this piece went over, and the crane went over, and there were people actually trying to actually work to put this in place, and 3 men died in the sad event. But yeah, it delayed the stadium a year. I think people were, were saddened that you're thinking of this great thing to come along, and then you have this tragedy. So it was hard, but I think over time heals things. And it was a tough time, but I think the vision, like I said, people didn't lose track of that, and it was going to be the new home of the Brewers. And there is a statue of the gentleman that died out front of the ballpark that they remember for their service to the team.
Like, where were you like when that like took place? Like when that happened, like you like where do you like or remember you like hearing about that? Or, like,
Yeah, we were. It was over like a break. Like I said, during the midsummer, you have the All-Star game. We have a team that's a couple days off, but players stay in town and maybe have some workouts. And we were actually at County Stadium, and we were players were out hitting or whatever. Came back in, and remember being in the clubhouse, and when this piece kind of toppled over onto the new stadium they were building, I mean, we could feel it. It was loud. It was noisy. It was like an earthquake. and nobody really kind of knew what happened, and and then you kind of ventured out of the building outside to see what happened, and then they actually shut down the whole valley here pretty much until they could kind of investigate what happened, what all went on. I think we were playing the Royals like that Friday over this, usually it's like a Monday through Wednesday or Thursday. I think that game got canceled for a day because they were still trying to sort out all the things that had happened. But yeah, it was quite shocking, that's for sure.
So I guess apart from all this negativity, how was the feeling when it was finally completed? Like moving from one stadium to another.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great experience. We had to move out at the end of that one season before we moved in, out of the old place so they could demolish it. But coming in here was, like I said, going into a new home. I think fans were excited. They had President George Bush was the president at the time. He came throughout the first ball. It was a sellout crowd. Richie Sexton, who was our first baseman, hit a home run to win the game, kind of, storybook type thing. But it was cool. It was great. I think it started a new era, for the Brewers.
And as we talk about like the new era for the Brewers and like the new stadium as another part, like how did it feel like being the clubhouse manager for the 2022 All-Star, not 2022, but 2002?
Yeah, All-Star game.
All-Star game.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's you have players. Obviously we had the National League guys here, so you had the best of the best. The Diamondbacks had won the World Series the year before, so you had a lot of their staff because the manager gets to pick his staff. So you had a lot of the Diamondback guys, a lot of them I knew as just guys that have come through or played or were friends. I think you had Kurt Schilling and Randy Johnson here on the team. Barry Bonds was here. They had a home run derby, which was kind of crazy that Bonds hit a home run, I think, to win it or at least to take the lead. The game ended in a tie, so it was kind of a crazy way it finished. But it was great. It was a great experience.
As you brought up or talked about the tie, how did it feel like being a part of it? Like you brought up earlier, you were behind the scenes. People don't know behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Obviously, you were a part of it. How did that feel to be a part of the only tie in MLB?
Yeah, it was disappointing. It's just the rosters were set to a certain number, and they went through pretty much all the players on both sides playing, and the game kept getting longer and longer, and they had to make a decision how to settle it. So it was unfortunate, but I think they've had made adjustments, with adding more players to the roster now, and they have different rules in place, so that just won't happen again,
So at any time you did not, you thought the game was going to end, with someone winning, you didn't think it was going to end in the tie?
Yeah, it kept going back and forth, the score, and then, it got to the point where the managers were had to consult with the commissioner to how do we settle this or how do we figure this out, because we don't have players. And you got to remember too, the All-Star game is it's kind of a fun event, right? So it's kind of a break. It's an honor for the players, but it's also a break from the season. But you can't risk a player's health away from their team, and say, oh, you just go out and pitch, you're an infielder, just pitch the game. Well, it's hard to make that decision when you could hurt somebody's career. It could damage the second half of their season that team's on, if it affects how they play, if they lose a player. So there's a lot more kind of to it behind the scenes.
And then you mentioned you were the Batboy, so I was just wondering if you ever traveled with the team.
Yeah, when my first year, my early years, I should say, they always took a Batboy on a road trip. You always got to go on one trip. They kind of picked, and usually they took two kids, and you would room together, and you would have to be somewhat accountable to hey, you guys, the team bus is at 2:00 or whatever it is. Go to the stadium. You'd hang out there. You'd Batboy the game. Afterwards, you take the bus back, and they gave you a little bit of expense money or meal money, so you could have lunch or breakfast while you're there. But it was great, to be a young kid. At 16, 17, to go to Baltimore. I think my first trip was Baltimore, New York, maybe, and then it was Chicago, Cleveland one year. So it was pretty interesting, pretty neat to see other ballparks, to see other people in different cities. If you hadn't traveled much, you got to see some things in those towns.
As we talk like more like recent times,
Mm-hmm.
now like how does like you've had like a really great time working with the Brewers, obviously, and just like a long history being a part of the Milwaukee Brewers organization. But how did you work your way up? Like obviously you started with Batboy and you worked your way up
Yeah.
now to like being like director of clubhouse operations and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, can you take us through that and like how it affected your life into the
Sure.
person right now?
As you guys started as a bat boy, and then I worked for the home clubhouse manager, so I became his assistant. And I worked. My timeline, it was kind of like the 4 years of high school. It was kind of a bat boy, a clubhouse attendant, and then when I came back in college, there was a gentleman before me that was the assistant to the main guy, and he kind of had moved on, so I kind of filled that role, and I was his assistant for like 4 years, I would say, through college, and I was about in my last semester to graduate. And the guy that I worked for, it was just unfortunate, but he had passed away at a young age, in his mid-40s. So I was kind of in, right place, right time, right place, wrong time, whatever, however you want to say it. But I had kind of been in that role as the second man. The job opened up, and they believed in me, even at a young age, that I could do it, and they hired me. So, I didn't think I'd be doing this. I thought I'd be graduating at that time in my life, and maybe the next, couple months, and I go get, as I say, a real job, not working in baseball. Not that it's not a real job, but it was a fun job. I even had an opportunity prior to that, taking this role, where a gentleman that was in our marketing department was leaving, and they had actually offered me the job to be in marketing. They said, "Hey, we'd like to hire you. You're going to be graduating in December. We'll hire you now. Finish school." It was an opportunity, like in sales, and that's kind of, had an interest in that. And I told him I'd think about it. I took the job, and then the next day I went back and said, I don't think I can do it. My heart wasn't in it. And he understood, and he said, these opportunities don't come along like they every day, but I said, I understand. And a few months later, I was in this role. So you never know where your life's path goes, You can plan, and sometimes the plans don't always go that way, but they can go another way. So that's kind of where how I got the job and how I ended up in that position, and kind of been here ever since.
Yeah, and then I guess through that time, you've obviously worked with a whole bunch of players and coaches.
Sure.
And if you want to talk about relationships with all those players and coaches.
Yeah. I think you talk about chemistry earlier, and you make connections with different people, just as you do in life or in school, as you guys go to as you go to different schools or you meet people. There's some people you click with and some you don't. In my job or role, our job is to kind of service the players and take care of their needs, and make their life as easy as we can, so when they're on the field they can play the game. So whether it's ordering their bats and equipment, or taking care of the clubhouse, or helping their families get somewhere, or getting them a rental car, or whatever the task might be. But I think it's chemistry that you connect with different people. Some I've made lifelong friends here with a lot of players, and there's been a lot of guys that have went through here. But I wouldn't say I have a favorite. Some people say, "Who's your favorite player?" I said, "Well, they all are." That's my answer. They love them all, and I do. But you get closer to some than others, and you have more common interests. You might have family that's kids the same age. I know known Robin Yount, Jim Gantner, my whole life, and I think being in that era with them, we got closer with those guys, and I think to this day we keep in touch. A guy that played here, Rob Deere, we were about the same age. In '86, he kind of made the team as a non-roster player. Nobody really knew who he was, and it was kind of my first season as kind of running everything, and we became good friends. He went on to have a great career, and to this day we're still friends.
Yeah. And I believe before you said that you were good friends with Bob Euchre. So
Yeah.
If you could go over how you
Sure.
met.
I met Bob obviously through working here, in the clubhouse, and we became friends. And he was close with my boss at the time, Bob Sullivan, who passed away. And when I was offered the job and got the head job, we travel on the road a lot. I think for my first 18 seasons, I made every road trip with the team, going every place they went, as did the radio staff, the TV staff. So Bob and me became just good friends, and have gotten close and still are good friends to this day. He's my son's godfather. He's been his godfather. It's my choice because he was my closest friend, to pick him. And not for the name, but because of the person he is. And but they've made a lot of good friends here, and Bob's been a great friend.
And then I guess you could dive into some TV spots that you did with Bob Uecker.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, we so Bob has a deal or an arrangement with Usinger's Sausage, and he used to do TV and radio stuff with them. And one year he just said, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to have you on the radio with me, do these things." And I was just like, "Yeah, sure." I think he's joking around. He goes, "No, I'm going to talk to the guys, John Gabe down there at Usinger's. We're going to have you do some spots with me." I said, "Sure, okay, yeah, right." Well, the guy calls and he says, "Hey, would you like to do these?" I'm like, "Sure." So that kind of started it, and he did some of these spots with him. And then it led to a couple TV spots too that they still run today, which are kind of silly, but it was fun to do,
And then as we talk about obviously you say you didn't have a favorite player, because they're all great. But what would you say is your Mount Rushmore of Brewer players, or just people you came in interaction with in the Brewer organization? Who's your Mount Rushmore?
Yeah. Top 5, or is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, top 5, your top 5.
Okay. I'll tell you, it's tough because there's so many, and you hate to leave somebody out, but if you had to maybe list a few of the guys, I mentioned earlier Robin Yount. I think just first class guy, was a dedicated player, played hard and loved the game and wanted to win and succeed. He's probably one of the few Brewers that will be somebody that's come through the system and played 20 years with the team and then retired. You don't see guys playing their whole careers anymore. It's just the way things kind of work. So you got to respect that for all the time he put in. Then there'll be guys that, somebody go, "Who's that?" But it's just somebody you were close to or, had a friendship. A guy that came and played only 2 seasons here was Dave Parker. And Dave became a good friend, just connected. He was like a mega star with the Pirates and played a lot of years in the big leagues, and I just had a lot of respect for him. But he was just a unique person that I think we connected well with. It's hard to not say, Jim Gantner, who's been here a long time, Paul Molitor, Ryan Braun. Ryan was a good friend, a great player. You'd have to put him up there. Ben Sheets was another one, pitcher that pitched with us a long time.
I guess, bringing up Ben Sheets, you did mention the CAPS organization.
Yeah, there's an organization called Caps for Kids, and it provides children with cancer caps from different teams, venues, and it's out of New Orleans. And our association, the MLB CMA, which is Major League Baseball Clubhouse Managers Association, has a relationship with them, and we would, working with New Era Cap, they would provide each team with 24 caps, and we'd have our players sign them, and we would send them back to Caps for Kids, which is in New Orleans, and they would distribute them to different children's hospitals all over the country, and not just baseball, but there's other sports, golfers, and we're taking part of this. So in the chapter here at Children's, Ben would go, we did that for 2 seasons or so, maybe more, and we would just go to the hospital, and he would just randomly walk, go into a room and talk to these kids and give them a hat. And it was just a unique experience. Ben was a very thoughtful, heartfelt guy. He had children of his own, that were young at the time. And I think just to put a smile on a child's face, and I think the experience I had out of that was not just what he did, But what it meant to the parents having to visit. A lot of times the kids were so young they didn't know maybe even who he was, but they knew he was an athlete. He had a jersey on and he was giving them a hat. But I think the parents really appreciated what they were going through, and that somebody would take the time to kind of visit their child and have a discussion. And it wasn't just pop in and out, but he would spend time with the kids, and it was really really meaningful.
What impact do you think? Obviously, Bussy would have known in the future the impact of the Brewers and the community of Milwaukee. But
Yeah.
what impact do you think the Brewers have in Milwaukee that has changed the landscape of Milwaukee of when you grew up to now our present time?
Present time? Wow. I think the whole venue of sports and these teams, they've grown to be bigger than life sometimes. I guess when I look at Brewers, the Bucks when I was younger, like I mentioned earlier, there wasn't a lot of TV games, for the Brewers or the Bucks. You kind of sparingly saw them. Now, you can't. Every game's on TV. Everybody's watching, and everybody's more involved. So I think baseball is kind of is part of life, and it's the community here. And I really think that if you say there's a difference from early years to now, it's hard to pinpoint. But I just think the popularity's there, and it does help give the city credibility and recognition.
As you talk about the popularity, do you think the popularity in this city now has to deal with more of social media as well? Obviously behind you is Christian Yelich,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people's favorite players, stuff like that. But do you think the Brewers impact is more because of social media, or their life outside of social media, their way to connect with the community and doing stuff to help be bigger than sports?
Yeah, I think social media is a big part, and I think for our team, what little I know, is I can't speak for all the other teams in baseball, but I know the Brewers do a lot in the community here, and I think our community relations director Katina does a great job of connecting with kids groups and different venues in town to kind of get the guys out and make appearances and meet people. So I think social media has played a big part, but I think your community relations people within your organization are really important and key to kind of getting out there.
As we start to wrap it up, is there anything else that you want to cover or talk about that we didn't cover through our own history?
Let me think. I grew up in Milwaukee. I think it's a great city. I really do. The winters can be a little tough, as we know, but but we all got to live with that. But no, I think Milwaukee's got a great community, and I think sometimes it doesn't get the credit it should. It's interesting because interacting with other people in baseball and that travel and they'll come to Milwaukee and play the Brewers for 3 or 4 days and they'll stay downtown and they go, man, you know what? I really didn't realize how great a downtown it was. Or I stayed at the Pfister and we walked into the Third Ward, or they're here in the summer and they're Summerfest is going on, or there's a festival. And I think a lot of people don't realize all the great things that Milwaukee does have, and sometimes kind of focus on the things we don't have. But I think you should be appreciative for what we have and where the city's come. And you just you gotta believe in the community and just be kind to people, and enjoy where you live.
And do any of the players ever have conversations with the players when they talk about Milwaukee? People are not from here.
Yeah, no, I think guys enjoy playing here. A lot of them have said, it's obviously a smaller town, but it's there's more community here. You feel more part of it. I think you have a better following. The media is actually favorable to you, in Milwaukee. But I think a lot of the guys also enjoy, the connection the fans have with them. I don't know if you have that in bigger cities, and they feel that bond. Yeah.
That's all we have, I think.
Yeah.
We just want to say thank you again for
Oh,
your
sure.
time
Yeah.
and being able to welcome us to Miller AmFam Stadium.
Yeah.
And being able to interview for our history.
Yeah.
Especially you.
Yeah.
Big thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.